It's a phone call that every parent dreads. You're told that your child has been injured. Your mind starts to race. How badly were they hurt? Will they survive? And that was a call that Pat McLeod got from a very upset and panicked 14-year-old Nate, his son, trying to tell his dad what happened to his 16-year-old brother Zach on the football field, an event that would greatly impact the McLeod family. Zach's parents, Pat and Tammy, are here. Guys, great to have you.
Oh, so great to be here.
So before we talk about what happened to Zach and how that affected your family, you were chaplains at Harvard, one of the most famous universities in Boston. How did that all take place?
Pat wanted to come to Boston to study science and religion, and one of the few universities that pulled those two fields together was Boston University. So that brought us to the city.
And you were a Montana boy.
That's right.
And we're talking that your brother Mike actually played for the Edmonton Eskimos. So I'm an Alberta guy, you're Montana. We're almost like, we were neighbors, literally.
Yeah.
What was the ministry like there? I mean, you're going into Harvard and you're, talking about the love of Jesus.
Oh, well, okay, so yeah, it is very different than our experience in Bozeman. But I went to school in Bozeman. That was kind of the way those were my people, and so
In
it
Montana,
happened
yeah.
very naturally. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, there's definitely some differences in Harvard, but students are students. They're at a similar stage of life. They're dealing with a lot of the same things, and we love it. We didn't plan to stay, but we're there, and we're gonna stay.
So 2008, you're at Harvard. Students are coming in. You're excited about a new year. And you get a phone call. Now, your cell phone was in a bag, and your son, Nate, was trying to get a hold of you. Tell me, play that event out for me.
Yeah, it's as you described. We were in a big auditorium. It's kind of like being in the mosh pit of a concert with people really excited to see each other who've been on different sides of the country all summer. A girl comes up behind me, a Harvard student, tugging on my shirt and hands me her phone. She said, "Your son's trying to get a hold of you." And I pick up the phone. "Do you want me to tell you what happened?" Yeah, so the call you've described was, my very panicked son, Nate, telling me that Zach had been injured. He'd collapsed on a football field. Nate had been, all kinds of people had been trying to reach us, and they were now calling at home where Nate was, and he was there all alone except for this one other person, and he'd been calling us. Our phones were both either turned off or in, like you said, in a bag. And he said, yeah, Zach's being airlifted to a hospital to undergo emergency brain surgery.
So you knew it was very serious. You head to the hospital. Tammy, how did you find out, and what was your immediate response?
Pat told me to come with him, just follow him. I had no idea what was going on. And then when we got outside of the room, he told me what happened. So we ran to the car and raced through the city of Boston to a hospital we had never been to before, the trauma hospital, Boston Medical.
And what did you see when you got there, the condition of your son, and what were you being told?
So he was laying still. His eyes were open, but he wasn't there in the moment. So it was difficult to see him in that way. He still had the bottom half of his uniform on and his cleats. So he was ready to be rolled into emergency brain surgery. And we had a few moments with him before the surgeon came in.
Did you feel at any point that he might not survive the surgery?
I thought he probably would survive, but I had no idea what would come out on the other end. The surgeon said when he arrived, death to full recovery or anything in between.
Pat, you're a longtime follower of Jesus. I mean, there's this. You're the dad. Your son, he's in trouble, but you believe in prayer. You believe in God. I'm sure during that time you're praying and just pleading with God. I'm sure, like, please be with my son.
A little bit. That's true. I was in shock. And still sort of taking this in. There were moments when I'm like, when you have three young boys and they all are very active. I mean, Nate, our son, had broken his arm 5 times. We were kind of used to getting calls like this, and for a while, that I'm trying to think, is this an easy fix? It sounds like they're going to go in, they're going to take out a blood clot and close this back up. Maybe he'll be, he even said he might have a full recovery, and so. Yeah, I mean, it was confusing. It was overwhelming. It wasn't the feeling of desperation that you've just described didn't come probably until the next day when I was on the phone with someone else and kind of began to absorb what was really possible here.
Tammy, when did you find out that Zach's injury, his brain injury, he would survive, but his brain injury was very severe and he would not be the same young man that you knew?
In the ICU, we still didn't know yet, but when we got to the rehab hospital and saw him progress, he was hitting limits. And eventually in the rehab hospital, they said, he's so severely injured that he won't be able to go home with you, which is what we were hoping. So I would say for me, it was at the half-a-year mark when the rehab hospital said, you need to have him move into a neuro rehab school so he can have the best chance at a strong recovery.
Well, by the way, when you say we were hoping that he would come home, obviously.
Yeah.
Not that he wouldn't come home. We're hoping that he'd come
Yeah, we really wanted him to come home, and they told us it's not going to happen.
Well, it's an amazing story, and there's so many parts of this. We're going to come back with Pat and Tammy in just a moment. They've written a book called Hit Hard, and I'll be honest, it has impacted me greatly. There's so many things that we're just not going to be able to cover, and I would encourage you to get the book because these guys were so honest about their own situation within their marriage and how they were handling this trauma. And we're going to come back and talk about how their faith was impacted, how their children were impacted, and how Zach is doing today. We'll be right back. So Tammy, before we went to break, we're talking about the fact that you now know that Zach is not going to be the same. How did that impact your faith?
The year before the injury happened was the deepest part of my relationship with God ever. And so when the tragedy hit, it just continued. So I experienced the love of God at a really deep level. The Psalm 34 that talks about the Lord is near to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit was so powerful to me. I finally saw it in experience. I wasn't just reading a verse of scripture, but I saw that it wasn't like I was some special person, that it's actually God's nature to be near people in suffering. It's what he does.
He certainly does. Now, before we move on to the story with Zach, is you had a real special relationship with your son. I mean, again, reading the book, and I was being honest with you guys, it brought tears to my eyes at points, because you would play worship music together, he played the guitar, you had this really cool relationship with your son. Tell me about Zach.
So we loved just sharing with each other what we were learning in scripture and what we wanted to see God do in our lives and in the world through us. So we shared each other's hopes and dreams about the future. His walk with God was very, very deep as a 16-year-old. So we had the mother-son bond, but then we had a spiritual bond. So we would pray together every night for his school, sing worship songs together.
Wow, and I know that's part of the story that you miss, because a part of Zach changed that time. So Pat, tell me about when Zach was in South Africa and he's with disabled kids. He comes home and says something very profound.
Yeah, so we were in our kitchen right before he was heading out for school and impersonating some of these kids, because we each sort of bonded with a different one of the kids with these disabilities. And Zach just paused. There was a pause in the laughter and stuff, and it wasn't mocking them. We just loved them, and it was in terms of endearment for sure. And Zach turned to me and he said, "You know, Dad, I've wondered if God would ever have me become like one of them." And I remember, taking it seriously, not like joking about it or anything like that, and just looking him in the eye and thinking of it. It was sort of strange, but I said, "Zach, if anything ever happened and you did become like one of them, you know that we would love you the same way we love those kids this summer, right?" He's like, "Yeah, I know."
And when this happened, and then you're very transparent and honest in the book, Tammy, is the relation, now you guys are a team, you've been ministry, you're together, but when this tragedy happened, you were viewing it from different perspectives and it put a lot of tension on your marriage.
Yes, I was living in the we lost Zach side more, because he couldn't speak anymore. and we couldn't pray together and we couldn't share with each other what we used to share. I was focused more on the loss of who he used to be. And Pat was more celebrating the Zach we have. And I thought maybe he's in denial. So the anger started, just me wondering, can I just be sad that I lost my son? Don't try to cheer me up.
And for you, Pat, and I think this is important for guys, and I would encourage guys to read your book.
Thank you.
Sometimes we try to be macho, tough guy. And I mean, what did you learn through it about yourself and maybe your reaction and understanding where your lovely wife is coming from?
I'm still learning.
Okay, good. We're all learning.
I think grief is complicated, and you know, it's not like you have. No one really teaches you to grieve, but I think we're being taught often as men not to grieve. You know, when we have pain, we're not to show any visible sign of weakness, and when we're sad, we're told not to cry. And you know, when you're a football player, you're told to be tough, and that was sort of my upbringing for sure. And so I felt my job as a man was to be the stable one and to not actually grieve. And so yeah, I didn't when I did, it wasn't usually with Tammy, and the few times when we sort of were in sync and I actually let myself sort of connect with what was going on inside of me, I think it meant a lot to Tammy for sure.
So you're going through this, you know, you're having some struggles both, you know, in the terms of the marriage. I mean, never thought about not continuing on. And you're dealing with Zach, and he has so many needs. He had a second fall, which was horrific, suffered some more brain injury. All this is going on, and you've got a daughter, and you've got two other sons. How did it impact them?
One thing I've learned through this whole trial is that the whole family system is affected. So Chelsea lost her best friend in an instant. So no more texting the things that she wanted to.
Yeah, they were tight.
Yeah, really close. And then Soren slept in the same bed as Zach, even when they were big. So he was like a dad brother to him.
Yeah.
So in a moment, he lost the person he was closest to in the world besides us. And then Nate lost his mentor and friend.
Yeah, so I mean, everybody loses in this, and yet Zach is an inspiration. And we're just about out of time. How is Zach today? And I know we got a chance to meet one of our heroes, Tim Tebow, who's a great guy. We have so much respect for him. But how is he doing today? And even that meeting with Tim Tebow.
Yeah. So Zach is, and this is one thing, and you know, I just want to make sure we make clear is that every loss like this, every ambiguous loss is different, you know. And one of the things that has made this endurable for us has been that Zach himself is like the most joyful person that I know, and probably has the deepest connection to God of anyone that I know. But he has hardly any short-term memory. He can't really speak. He can't walk without someone accompanying him. He has to have 24-hour attention. He's very, you know, impulsive. So there's still a lot of challenges. But to me, and this is a part of the Hit Hard story, he's very life-giving. I mean, there are a few things that happen that are draining, but for the most part, it's the happiest moment of my week when he shows up at our house and we get to be together again.
Well, thank you both for coming in, and you mentioned ambiguous loss, and we're going to have you back because this is something I think that, you know, as towards the end of the book, you know, a light came on for you guys and how you dealing with this, because Zach didn't pass away; he was still here, but it wasn't the same Zach that you knew and loved. In a sense, you've come to love somebody else, but it's the same guy in many ways. And it's a very, very important thing that we want to talk. So we're going to bring you back, and we look forward to that. We didn't have nearly enough time. It is a wonderful book. It's called Hit Hard. And again, with Pat and Tammy just being so vulnerable and honest and open about the conversation and all that was going on in their lives, and I encourage you to get it. And whatever you're going through today, maybe it is one of these ambiguous losses. Maybe somebody you know has Alzheimer's, or there's been a brain injury, or if you're just going through a difficulty right now, give us a call. Our prayer lines are always open, 1-866-273-4444. We'd love to talk to you.